This is YouTube's biggest art collab. One creator makes their mark on this huge board and then sends it to another to do the same. And now it's coming here. And I have an idea which involves you. It's finally here in my art studio, also known as the kitchen table. No one's going to be eating here for a while. It was actually a lot lighter than I thought it would be and very well secured. So much soft stuff and bubble wrap, which I definitely didn't purposefully pop at least 3 of, maybe 4, maybe 5. I've got a problem. It's bubble wrap. I can't help myself. This thing was so well secured, which I'm actually really glad of because all of these amazing artists have put their work on it so far and I did not want to break it. Opening this thing up to reveal the artwork for the first time, my goodness. 1000 went first, who is the mastermind behind all of this. He sent it to Temi Danso Art and then BlackBean CMS and then CurrieGOAT, who obviously asked me to take part next. All of the work is beautiful and I think it speaks for itself, so I'll just shut up and you can just look at it. CurrieGOAT added these doors on. As soon as I saw them, I had an idea. To me, it's like a treasure chest where you open up this thing to unveil the treasure inside. And obviously, I'm going to be doing this in pixel art. There are a lot of ways to do pixel art in a traditional way. The first thing you could do is paint the pixels. Like this piece here by Cure, which is absolutely fantastic. I did test this out and the tests were not very successful. You could also try pointillism, which is a painting technique where you basically paint in small dots. I did try this as well. We don't talk about this. We don't talk about the apple. There's also cross stitching, which is kind of similar, looks amazing and pixelated, but probably not what I'm going to go for because there's one thing that I really want to try. Mosaic art. You might be familiar with historical mosaics. Today you can get some contemporary mosaics and even mosaic pixel art graffiti by this incredible artist called Invader. This is the route that I want to go down. So I'm going to be doing my design on the front of the board. I think it might be really difficult to do a mosaic on the inside. 1000 did say in the note that he wants this to be a cohesive piece and I just don't think it would really fit. So I have an idea to create like a symbol almost on the front which represents that treasure chest opening feeling. But that's not all. I also make games, right? So let's play a game. I'm going to lock the doors shut with a combination lock. And since the community for this collab has been super passionate, it's going to be up to you to figure out the combination. Throughout this video, I'm going to sneakily share 4 clues. Find and follow these clues to figure out the combination. I'm not going to make it easy, so make sure you don't skip any part of the video or you might miss it. You can help each other out, and when you figure it out, leave a comment and I might pin a comment of the correct answer so that the next artist can use your comments to unlock this thing when they get it next. Good luck. Let's get on with making this thing. First things first, I measured the front face of the board to see how much space I had to work with. And this is a collaboration after all with multiple different artists, so I don't want to take up all the space. But with tiles and pixel art, I knew I would need a somewhat decent chunk of space, depending on the size of the tiles to make something actually readable. So gotta get my ruler out and measure it up. Speaking of tiles, I have these. They're quite basic glass tiles, not stained or anything like that. But before I can do anything with them, I had to sort through them, see what colors I had to work with, and see what they were like. And it kind of just looks cool in a time lapse too, I'm not used to filming traditional art. There's so much more freedom and fun with using a camera compared to just recording a screen, which is what I usually do for digital art. Saying that, this did lose its novelty factor after about 30 seconds. It took so long, but I eventually got it done. So the tiles themselves are 10mm or 1cm squares with about 3mm in thickness. And how cool is it that I had these jars with the colors on top? I didn't order these were just hidden away, but I finally found a use for them. But saying that, once I sorted everything out, I did have some concerns. The distribution of colors was not very even, I barely had any black tiles, which is a huge concern because I probably use a lot of the black for an outline. Guess I need to design something and see how it goes. This is my first time ever doing a mosaic. I was doing tons of research beforehand on the equipment, the materials, the processes, do's and don'ts, little tips that people have, just trying to absorb as much information as possible before I get started on this. And before doing anything, I would write down each step of the process to make sure that I was on the right track. You know what they say? Failing to prepare is preparing to fail. I started with measuring out and marking the area so I had a rough idea where it was going to be. Because I knew the tiles were 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter, I could basically convert that into the size that I needed. The canvas size was going to be about 24 by 24 pixels, which is quite small actually. It's going to be very simple, but that's okay because I think that is the beauty of pixel art. Took a picture of the board from the top so I could test my design on top of it. And without spoiling any design details just yet, I had a rough idea in mind that I had to test out. I learned 2 things. 1, I definitely didn't have enough tiles of certain colors, and 2, I didn't really like these tiles. They had some color irregularities and inconsistencies, which can look okay on a larger mosaic piece, but for a design this small, I thought it would make it look a lot lower quality. So I need to really settle with a design so that I know exactly which tile colors I need and how many I need before I get some new tiles. Back to the design. Because of the limited pixels, it's obviously better to design something super simple. Kind of want something symmetrical for each door so that it opens up and closes and looks pretty good. So I tried an eye, a treasure chest, but then it hit me. A skull. You may have noticed my tattoos, but I love skulls. What sort of adventure treasure hunt vibe doesn't have a skull involved? Didn't really like this basic white skull. I still wanted my design to match sort of the colors and be a bit more cohesive with the work that's inside the board. So I decided to make it a golden skull, which is also inspired by one of my favorite digital paintings that I've ever done, the cursed golden monkey statue. So I was testing this idea out on the board and I thought it would be cool if I could put the lock in the skull's mouth. So I'd have this golden skull, I'd paint the background blue, which would match the work from the inside. I did think I could maybe make that blue a little bit more interesting, having designs of gems and treasures surrounding the skull as well to really bring home that point. But I hadn't fully decided on that yet. The most important part is the skull. So with some tweaking and that design decided, it was time to order some new tiles. Fortunately, I found an incredible mosaic supplier in the UK. I could choose exactly the tiles that I needed and in nice quantities. So not only are they better for the job, but it actually turns out cheaper too, which is important because I'm broke. Now I just had to wait for them to arrive. And while I wait, it was time for a trip to B&Q. Check out this butterfly. Maybe I could use this for the board. What if I just spray painted the whole thing? I even came across some wild pixels. Have you ever seen a pro sponge? Maybe this will help. This would definitely help. This helped a lot. And obviously I wanted to check out the locks and fittings so that I could lock the board. So back at the kitchen table studio, got some sandpaper, which I need for later, got a new metal ruler, got some fittings for the lock, and the pro sponge. You can't just get a normal sponge, you gotta get a pro sponge. I also got this cheap brush that I needed. But anyway, the lock. I have some problems. Let me demonstrate it with the lock that I've already got. I was thinking of attaching the lock to the board inside the skull's mouth, but all of the combination locks that I found were crazy heavy, and I would either damage the artwork or rip the fittings out of the board by putting the lock on it. And the other problem is I couldn't find a lock that was wide enough to fit inside of the fittings that I got. This is more complicated than I thought it would be. I had some more sturdy fittings as well, which might have done a better job of holding up a heavy lock, but the distance between them was even greater, and it would probably just cause even more damage just fitting this thing to the board. Maybe I could use the loops that CurrieGOAT put on in some way, but this kind of lock definitely wasn't good enough. So I did some searching for some locks, then I found this, which is perfect. It has a thin extendable cord that would easily fit through the loops. It's super light and it's a combination lock, so we can still play our little game. Speaking of, have you found any clues yet? Have there even been any? Who knows? It's also retractable, which is just satisfying. It fits inside the tube and it fits inside the loops. This thing is perfect and it took so long to find. There's obviously this issue, but I've been meaning to test out these Posca pens I got a while back, so easy fix. Nice. So So the new tiles finally arrived, which were already way nicer quality and more consistent overall in the colors and sizes of these things. I got some variations of the colors I was using because I wanted to test them out. Some tweezers, which I thought would be useful and were cheap, and a grout spreader, which will come in handy later. 2 variations of grout that I wanted to test out. The grout color is super important, by the way, but we'll get into that later on. I also went for the iridescent tiles. You might not be able to fully see here, but they change color as they shift through the light. The back of the tiles are scored as well, so they'll hold the glue a little easier. I mean, just look at the quality difference. And it turned out to be way cheaper overall. You can see a bit better the difference between the iridescent tiles and the normal ones. I'm not sure what the best approach is to yet. I don't want it to be too much, but I'll do a test to figure that out. I got the rest of the colors that I needed and some for testing out, and these teal ones are my absolute favorite. I think they're perfect for the gem in the eye of the skull. Another good thing about these tiles is that they're 0.8 millimeters, which is 0.2 millimeters smaller than the previous tiles, and it should help the design be more readable since I can fit more tiles or pixels into the same space. I'm probably just going to send back the old tiles, so I put them all back in their plastic bag. After spending all of that time sorting them out, this was pretty painful, to be honest, but lesson learned, you know, take my time a bit before jumping the gun and just buying any old tiles. The new ones are much nicer, smaller and cheaper, so it's time to test them out. And the tweezers came in super handy for placing them. But I ended up doing a couple of versions of the mouth to really decide which variations look the nicest. And as much as I like the iridescent black tiles in the top right, I did prefer the high contrast normal black tiles against the yellows. But I was much happier with these tiles and it made me much more confident to just get started and put it all together. The first thing I did was draw a line across both of the doors. I'm going to be detaching the doors, and if I want the design to line up, I need to know how they line up when they're attached so I can use that as a guide. Tool time. Now I just got to detach the doors from the board. How many shots can I get just unscrewing a screw? Turns out there are a bunch. So many angles. Who would have known unscrewing something could be so exciting? Just me? Oh, okay. I was so scared of damaging the board or the artwork, so I try to keep the artwork protected for a lot of this. Yep, still there. And now it's gone. So now I have to prepare the board. So this process is just to make sure the wood is fully sealed because wood is porous, and if moisture is allowed to infiltrate, it will destroy the mosaic and the tiles will start popping off. And that's definitely not what I want. Whoa, listen to me. It's like I actually know what I'm talking about. I almost convinced myself. Safety first, don't want to be inhaling those wood particles. I use the Stanley knife to lightly score the surface, which will help the sealant get into the surface of the wood, cross-hatching this for maximum impact. Next up, I use the medium grit sandpaper to get rid of some of the edges of the score lines, and also I don't want too much of a bumpy texture for air pockets or whatever to form below the tiles. At least I think that's what it's supposed to do. I've really no idea, and wiped off all that dust to clean it up so that it's ready to seal. The sealant is basically just a mixture of water and PVA glue. Maybe a bit more. Tiny bit more. Put in the glue. Mix that up. Something so satisfying about mixing things. Reminds me of playing Potion Master as a kid. Mixing all the things up in the bathroom. Mom, look, it's toothpaste and bleach. It's a potion I made. Anyway, here you can see I've decided to scrap the whole mosaic idea, and instead you can just see me painting my masterpiece, my magnum opus. Two swans colliding as their necks tangle into an imploding galaxy. It's a modern metaphor for today's societal struggles. The critics say it will rival classic painters in history, but for some reason it wasn't showing up on the board, so I just went back to the mosaic idea and used the PVA stuff as a sealant, and wait for it to dry. It's finally time to tile. Today is the big day. I was actually pretty nervous. I hope the sealant works and I hope the tiles actually stick to the board. I started off with some measurements again, just making sure I knew exactly the area it was going to start and end at. And with a final hesitant thumbs up, I get my mosaic glue ready and it's time to get started. So there's a couple of ways to attach tiles, but I went with the put as much glue on as possible without making a mess and hope for the best method. It seemed to work quite well, and I had the design up on my phone for reference. I really wanted to make sure it was the right tile going down each time. first couple of lines was super stressful. I learned from doing the little tile tests that at least awkward method for placement was to do one row at a time. That way I could try to keep in check the distance between the tiles. There should be a consistent gap so I can grout it later on so it becomes super secure. I was using the tweezers a little bit, but actually I got a bit more control out of just using my finger, and after some rows my process was getting pretty nice. I'd line up all of the tiles in order to get them ready, put some glue onto the surface, put a little bit of glue onto the tile, and push it into place with my finger. Not only could I be more precise with my finger to get them into the right position, but it also helped comfort the tiles. Tiles can be anxious creatures, so, pat them on the head, softly whisper and tell them everything is going to be okay. This is their new home now, and that should help them settle into their new environment. There's not much else to say with this process really. If you've seen me place one tile, you've seen them all. Watching this back, it really does look like I'm trying to calm them down. I will say that once I got into it, it was super relaxing. It requires so much focus and patience just trying to line them all up. And I was kind of nervous that I wasn't putting enough glue on at first, but I was probably actually putting on too much glue, first time nerves. But for my first time ever doing a mosaic, I was really having a nice time. Ooh, but look at that gem eye. Love that one. For the gap between the head and the mouth, I just placed a single tile between it without gluing it down to get the distance. It's cool to watch it all come together. One half was done, and on to the next one. The main challenge with the second half was trying to make sure I started and ended the design in the right place, and trying to make sure that the tiles had similar sized gaps as the other half. It would be such a shame to put this thing together and find that it doesn't line up, or that the gaps are too inconsistent across the whole thing, but I finally got there in the end, and actually, I think it went pretty well. The gaps were quite consistent, and for the first time I got to see how the tiles would shine and change colours in the light, which was an awesome feeling. Now it's time to wait for it to dry, and onto the grout. This is going to get messy, so I made a quick sheet for the table. Not sponsored by Sainsbury's, don't shop there. It's actually mad expensive there, but it is my local, so no choice. Safety first, you definitely don't want to touch or breathe this stuff in. So I have two different color grouts, and I did do some digital tests, but they're not very good. Grout is like a cement, and it helps keep everything secure, but it's also a visual component of the mosaic too. The color of the grout can really change how the final mosaic looks. If it's too dark, you get really clear gaps between the light tiles, and if it's too light, you get really clear gaps between the darker tiles. It all depends on your design and the tiles you're using, but for this one, I think a nice solution was to pick some sort of mid-range value colors. Not too high contrast between the dark and light, which is why I went for the gray and blue colors. Everything was going really well so far, so I was quite confident getting into the test, but that didn't last long. I spread the grout to test it, and it should just wipe off because it hasn't been activated with water yet, but as I tried to get it off, it started to stain the tiles and the board and just stick in there. I started to panic a little bit. This was a nice reminder that actually everything can still go horribly wrong if I mess this up, and it was hard to tell if I even liked the grey or not. So instead of doing a test with the blue and giving myself another heart attack, I decided to just go with the blue because I really think that color contrast between the orange and yellow would suit it better and give it some nice character. So time to mix the grout. Pour it into a little bowl. Make a well in the middle for the water. And pour that in. It did say 25% water to grout, but I definitely put too much water in to start, and panic number 2 sets in. It was way too thin. Some sources online say it should be like peanut butter and others like toothpaste, but toothpaste is nothing like peanut butter, so how am I supposed to know what consistency I actually need? It can't be too runny or it'll just run out of the sides, and it also can't be too thick because then it won't get into all of the gaps. I had no idea when this was right. One guide said to look when it's thick and a bit more matte, when the surface is starting to lose its shine. And remembering that was actually so helpful because when I spotted that, it allowed me to make the decision to just go with it. You never know when one tiny tip can help you out of a sticky situation. Literally. Now it's time to grout. The grout is ready and I have my spreader ready. It's time to just dump it on. This could be a horror film, all of this hard work so far and the precision of placing each tile. It really contrasts this part of the process because it's so different. Having to just lump this goopy mess on top and spread it all over and basically just hope for the best. I can easily say this part was not relaxing. using my finger to push the grout into the gaps. When I thought I filled all the gaps, I used a slightly damp sponge, fully wringed out of water, to clean off the excess grout, since it's going to be much harder to clean that off when it's set. And I was surprised at how quick this grout dried up actually. Notice how I use each side of my pro sponge. I learned that technique from a useful tutorial. I was getting a little bit nervous about how messy the board was getting as well. I used a little pin thing I found to clean up the edges, but also trying to make sure I don't destroy the underside of the board, since people have to work on that side as well. Just cleaning up more of that excess grout. I started to get a bit more comfortable, since the tiles underneath weren't destroyed in any way and I wasn't making too much of a mess. Try clean up some of the edges with a knife. The edges were really hard to cover with grout and I probably didn't get enough on there. I think I did a pretty good job considering how much I was flapping at the first part of this process. It's still a bit messy, but once it's fully dry, clean everything up and finish it off. I started to clean it up by sanding off some of the dried up grout. It seemed to work okay, sanding it and wiping it away with a cloth. Once that was done, I obviously wanted to paint around it, so I used some more of that PVA sealant from before to prepare that area a little more. I don't know if that was completely necessary, but why not? You can never be too safe. I did a couple of coats of that and wait for it to fully dry. I used a hard bristle brush, slightly dipped in water to clean the tiles. It was really nice to start to see them shine again, and I felt more confident now seeing them clean and not completely ruined. Once all of that was dry again, it was time to paint on the board and give it a nice little border. And here I go, mixing things again, kinda trying to match the inside colours of the board. It actually feels really nice to paint on the board. I did a lot of my paint tests on canvas and that felt horrible in comparison. Maybe I would be more confident with painting if I just didn't use canvas in the future. Like I shared in the design, I was going to put a little gem design on, but I decided to just leave that up to the next artist, I think the skull is more than enough to contribute and I'm more interested to see how other artists use that space. I almost forgot to clean up the sides actually. I forgot that these things are doors that open. Ooh, are you ready for some more door screwing shots? Yes, look at that angle. What a shot. This is cinematography at its finest. Customized the lock with a little question mark, which I thought was relevant for the game, and it's all ready to reveal. But before that, let me reveal who the next artist is. Bill from Bill Making Stuff. I chose Bill because he's super creative, does all sorts of interesting crafts and builds, and I think he can bring something really unique to this board as well. Part of the requirement is to choose someone who has fewer subscribers than yourself, and he was just under my subscriber count, which I don't think will last long because I know he's gonna blow up. Hopefully not literally. Overall, I'm super happy with how it turned out. It's a simple design, but I love the way the tiles color shift in the light to make it seem like gems embossed on the board. I want to give a huge thanks to 1000 for setting all of this up and being an amazing example for all of the artists on this platform. I want to give thanks to the artists for their inspiration over the years, with a special thanks to CurrieGOAT for believing in me and always sharing the love. And last but definitely not least, I want to thank you guys for watching and supporting along the way. Let me know what you think in the comments. And of course, I can't forget the lock. I'm super excited to see what Bill does if he can unlock it, which is up to you, remember? Find those clues, figure out that combination, and help him unlock it.